My name's Emily. I'm 24, recently graduated, and in that weird in-between phase of life where everything feels like it's supposed to be starting, but nothing's actually begun. Noah and I had been dating for about a year, and somewhere along the line we decided a cross-country road trip was just the thing we needed before settling into real jobs and adult routines. It was supposed to be fun. Freedom, cheap motels, gas station snacks, and the open road. We bought a second-hand van, did a basic camper build in the back, and hit the highway with a playlist and no real plan. By the time we hit Louisiana, the weather had turned against us, and so had my patience. We were running behind schedule, soaked to the bone, and everything smelled like mildew and sweat. Noah, bless his impulsive heart, was still treating it like an adventure. I, on the other hand, was running out of patience for his reckless driving, his bad jokes, and the way he never wanted to stop and ask for directions. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't already pissed at him before the van slid off the road. We were somewhere in northern Louisiana, heading west on a back road near the Kisatchie Forest, trying to avoid the worst of the interstate flooding. The storm had been chasing us for hours, sheets of rain, lightning that lit up the whole world white, and wind that felt like it was trying to push us off the pavement. Noah insisted on pushing through, said the van could handle it, said he knew what he was doing, and then we hit the bend, too fast, too slick, and suddenly, we weren't on the road anymore. The tires lost traction, the van fishtailed, and we went sliding down a muddy embankment. We stopped with a jolt, half buried in waterlogged grass, one side tilted at an angle. Thank God we didn't flip. The whole thing happened so fast, I barely had time to scream. When it settled, I just sat there for a second, my heart thudding. Then I turned and laid into him. I told you to slow down, Noah. I told you. He didn't argue. For once. We were lucky. We had a phone signal, even this far out. I called 911, told them our location, and provided the best description I could. The fire department from the nearest town was already out on storm patrol, and they said help was on the way. Maybe 30 minutes, they said. Maybe more. By then, the light was fading. The van's front windows were fogging up from our breathing, and the storm outside was getting worse. Rain lashed the windshield, hard and slanted. Thunder boomed over the trees. The forest was on one side of us, dark and thick. The other side of the road, what we could see from the slope, was open marsh. "You're such a dumbass," I muttered, curling up in the passenger seat. That started another fight, the kind where voices get raised and fingers get pointed. Cabin fever, adrenaline, and frustration were bubbling over. Eventually, Noah muttered that he was stepping out for some air. "Great idea," I said. "Go get hit by lightning." He was reaching for the door when it happened. There was a sound, sharp, wet, heavy, like something large slamming into the rear of the van. Not a branch, not wind, something with enormous weight. Noah froze, hand still on the door handle. "What was that?" I whispered. He didn't answer. We both heard the next sound clearly. Something brushing against the side panel. A slow, deliberate drag of claws across metal. Noah twisted in his seat and tried to look in the side mirror toward the rear of the van, squinting through the rain-slicked glass. The mirror was nearly useless, covered in rain, streaked with mud from the slide, and fogged around the edges. I leaned in, pressing my face close, and tried to see past the blur. The storm had dimmed the world to a murky gray-blue, and now that dusk was closing in, the trees and swamp beyond looked like smudges on charcoal paper. Movement flickered, distorted by water and grime. A shape, huge and dark, moved just outside the weak glow of the taillight, but we couldn't make out more than a silhouette at first. Just the way it moved was enough to freeze my breath. Slow, heavy, not human. Then it stepped closer to the van, and we saw it clearly for half a second. Tall, broad across the shoulders, and covered in soaked, dark fur. Its head was low, almost level with its chest, moving slowly. The head looked canine, but everything else didn't. Even in that fleeting glimpse, I could see the unnatural curve of its spine, the way it moved on two legs. We didn't speak, we just stared, breath held, until it faded from view behind the van. "Let's get in the back," I said quickly, already scrambling between the seats. The van didn't have windows in the back. I didn't want to be in my seat when that thing decided to check out the front of the vehicle. The rear felt safer, more hidden, protected by metal instead of just glass. We moved quickly and quietly, then huddled low, crouched between a mattress and various large boxes. Noah clutched a tire iron he'd pulled from under the front seat. I kept my hand on my phone, though I had no idea who I'd call. Help was already on the way. We'd just have to hold on for a little longer. If we kept quiet, maybe whatever this thing was would lose interest and simply move on. Outside, something moved. We could hear it still, circling slowly, its footsteps squelching in the soaked ground. It didn't sound or move like any animal I'd ever heard. It breathed hard and loud, just outside the van walls, and every exhale carried a faint, growling edge, like each breath was a struggle not to make a full-throated noise. We held still, barely daring to breathe. Every now and then, it would brush up against the side with a wet slap of fur or skin against metal, or we'd hear the long scrape of claws dragging lazily across the paneling, testing, searching. Once the scratching paused just long enough to make me think it was gone, but then I heard a low grunt and the sound of nails tapping along the edge of the wheel well. It wasn't leaving. Not yet. Then the van rocked. Something had slammed into it from the side, hard enough to dent the thin metal wall inward with a groaning crunch. For a terrifying second, the entire vehicle tilted, one side lifting off the ground as though we were about to be rolled over. I could hear the frame strain under the weight, the creak of stressed metal and shifting suspension. I wanted to scream, but I bit it down, my hand flying to brace against the wall. I looked at Noah. His eyes were wide, jaw slack, like he couldn't decide whether to cry or pass out. Then the van dropped back down, and the footsteps moved away. We peeked toward the front, careful not to make a sound. The windshield was fogged and streaked with rain, making it hard to see much of anything clearly. But through the murk and the dim glow of the dashboard lights, a figure took shape. It stepped out from the side of the van and moved into the beam of the headlights, and for a few seconds, it stood there, right in front of us. It was horrific. Soaked black fur clung to its body, revealing a build that was disturbingly human in some ways, but all wrong in others. Its limbs were long, its arms hanging low with hands that ended in curled claws. Its back was hunched, shoulders rolling with each movement. The head was lupine, narrow and twitching, with ears that flicked as it examined the windshield. Its eyes caught the light, not glowing exactly, but reflective. And the way it moved, it wasn't the least bit confused or startled. It was curious, calculating. We stayed absolutely still, hearts pounding, trying to blend into the shadows of the van's rear. I prayed the darkness and clutter would be enough to make us invisible. I didn't know if it could see through the glass. I didn't know if it cared. I just knew I didn't want that to be noticed by that werewolf thing. A second later, the creature slammed into the front of the van with a sudden fury that made us both flinch. The impact shook the whole frame, and the windshield cracked immediately with a deafening snap, transforming into a spider web of fractures. The rain distorted the damaged glass, making the thing beyond it almost impossible to see, a looming blur of shadow and rapid movement. Then came another hit, and another. It was striking the glass with a clawed hand now, each blow more forceful than the last. I could hear the squeal of its claws across the surface, like metal on glass. On the fourth hit, the windshield partially gave way. A long split tearing down from the center, and one of its hands punched through with a jagged crunch. The hand thrashed, its arm caught halfway through, wedged between shards and safety laminate. It let out a furious, snarling moan. Not a howl, not quite a growl, but something deeper and more human in its frustration. The creature struggled to yank its hand back, clearly stuck, and I heard the wet scrape of flesh and fur against shattered glass. It yelped, angry and pained, then finally tore free with a sucking sound and the tinkle of falling fragments. The van rocked as it staggered backward, growling with a fury that made my skin crawl. It didn't try again right away. It just paced in front of the van, breathing like a locomotive. I squeezed Noah's hand. He was trembling. So was I. Then, without warning, the passenger side window exploded inward. I ducked instinctively, heart hammering as shards of safety glass bounced across the front seats and skittered onto the floor. The sound of rain surged louder through the opening, but it was drowned out by something else. That heavy breathing again. Wet, ragged, and close. We barely had time to register what was happening when something began to force its way through the jagged window frame. A massive, fur-covered head pushed in, ears flattened, muzzle wrinkled. Its snout was short and broad, lips curled back to reveal rows of uneven, yellowed teeth. The thing's eyes gleamed in the dashboard light, scanning the interior, locking on everything. It wasn't sniffing, it was watching. Its face was mere feet from where we crouched, and for a moment, all I could hear was its breathing, slow, guttural, and wet with exertion. It twisted slightly, trying to push in farther, but the small, jagged window frame and the angle of its shoulders kept it from fully entering. Then it snarled, a sharp, choked sound filled with rage, and yanked itself back out with a wet grunt of pain. We heard it stumble along the side of the van, claws scraping along the metal as it pulled itself up the bank. Another low growl followed, more frustrated than before. Then, sirens, distant but real, getting closer. The creature made one final pass around the van, then we heard it retreat, quick, heavy footfalls crashing into the brush. By the time the fire truck lights washed over us, the thing was long gone. They pulled us up the embankment with a winch. The sheriff came with them, a tall man in a soaked tan jacket and a face like he'd seen too much. He asked what happened. Noah, being Noah, couldn't help himself. We slid off the road. Then something attacked the van. We think it was a werewolf or a dogman, something like that. It stood up, it circled us, The sheriff raised a hand, cutting him off. His eyes flicked toward the tree line, then back to us. "You're lucky," he said flatly. He paused just a moment too long, then added, "Could have been worse if we hadn't shown up in time." But he didn't look Noah in the eye. Instead, his gaze drifted toward the woods, his jaw tight, the kind of look someone wears when they've seen something they'll never admit to. Not to strangers. The way he said it, the pause, the way he avoided Noah's gaze, told me he knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. He turned to his deputy and muttered something I couldn't catch. Then he told us to get our things. They'd tow the van later, when the storm is past. Noah looked at me as we climbed into the back of the fire truck, soaked and shaking, the creature's growls and shrieks still ringing somewhere deep inside me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Whatever we'd just lived through had settled between us like a shared fever dream, too fresh and raw to name. Outside, the storm kept raging, and somewhere beyond the trees, something was still out there, watching, waiting. My name's Darnell, born and raised in Lake Charles. I never had much. Grew up bouncing between cousins' houses, always running with guys like Ray because trouble was the only thing that made us feel alive. When Hurricane Laura hit in August 2020, I was 21 with no job, no real prospects, just a reputation and a short fuse. That storm wrecked the city, tearing roofs off, splitting trees, and plunging us into weeks of darkness. Nights were the worst. Silent except for distant sirens and the hum of mosquitoes, broken now and then by the crack of wood collapsing somewhere in the dark. That was when Ray said we should hit the little convenience store on Broad Street. He had a gun, and I had nothing better to do but follow. The parking lot was half flooded, water rippling black around our ankles as we splashed toward the busted glass doors. Inside, the place was humid and reeking of spoiled milk. The aisles were about 5 inches underwater, and the shelves were sagging or already collapsed. We laughed nervously as we sloshed through, sweeping cigarette packs, candy, and various kinds of booze into our bags. The register sat at the far end, dark but promising. Nobody was watching, no cops around, Lake Charles had bigger problems at the time. For once, it felt like we were free and the neighborhood was our buffet. That's when we heard a sound. Not glass breaking, not wood shifting, but the slow, deliberate scrape of something heavy moving deeper in the dark store. Ray froze, cocking his head. "Someone else is in here," he whispered. I wanted to believe him. Wanted it to just be another looter crouched in the dark. But my skin prickled. It just didn't sound right. The noise drew closer, something heavy sloshing through water and nudging aside broken shelving. Then came a crash, sudden and violent, as a metal rack collapsed with a clang and splash. We both spun around, adrenaline burning through the shock. In the murky dark at the end of the aisle, something moved. A silhouette shifted between piles of soaked debris. It crept forward low to the ground, walking on four legs like an animal. Even without light, we could tell it wasn't a dog. It was built all wrong, broader through the chest, its spine and limbs too long, too fluid in their movements. The outline of its back swayed slightly with each step, rising and falling like a predator stalking prey. We could hear it rifling through fallen cartons and crushed boxes, the sharp scrape of claws tearing at damp cardboard and dragging aside plastic-wrapped goods. Every now and then, it stopped and sniffed, long, deep inhalations that cut through the dark like the slow draw of a bellows. The sound was moist, almost wet, as if it were savoring every layer of decay in the air. I could hear it exhale in slow gusts, almost thoughtful. The soft tapping of its claws against the submerged tile mixed with the rustle of shifting junk, and the tension coiled tighter with every second it remained unseen. The air was heavy now, soaked with the sour stench of wet fur, rot, mold, and something ranker, like meat that had been sweating in the heat for days. It was all too much. My stomach tightened, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then it stopped, and slowly, like a machine unfolding, the thing began to rise. Its hunched back uncurled with a crackling fluidity, shoulders rolling as it climbed to its full height. The silhouette stretched impossibly tall, well over the shelves now, and we could hear its breathing, slow, heavy inhalations, as if it took great effort for it to stand upright. Then it turned toward one of the top shelves and began to paw through it, using the shelf to steady itself. It shoved boxes aside with impatient swipes, as if searching for something specific, each movement more forceful than the last. Items tumbled down to the floor, splashing loudly as they hit. The creature's long arms moved methodically, knocking down cans, cartons, and crumpled packaging, like it had all the time in the world. We stood frozen, watching it sift through the ruin like a raccoon at a garbage bin. Only this thing weighed probably 400 pounds or more. Ray suddenly whispered, "Rougarou." The word hit me harder than the sight. I remembered my grandma's stories, the Cajun tales she'd tell when storms came, about the cursed wolfman that prowled the swamps, hunting sinners and oath-breakers. She'd scare us into behaving with those stories. Now here it was, towering in front of us, real as the ruins all around us. We should have left right then. But Ray's eyes had looked past it and found the register. He muttered, "There's probably cash back there." His hand drifted down to his belt, and before I realized what he was doing, he pulled out a pistol I hadn't even known he was carrying. The metal caught what little ambient light there was, just enough to make my heart drop. I wanted to grab his arm and drag him away, to shake some sense into him, but I was frozen, half believing we were under some kind of spell. The creature turned its head toward us. Its eyes glowed faintly. Not red, not yellow, but a wet reflection like an animal at night. Its lips curled back, and the growl that followed was so deep it rattled through the water at our feet. My stomach dropped. Ray raised the gun, hands shaking. The crack of the shot split the dark. The bullet sparked off a metal shelf, clipping the beast's shoulder. It roared and bolted, splashing further into the back of the store. The sound of its frantic movements echoed everywhere. We stood frozen, ears straining. Then came the growling again, further away this time, but still close enough to scare the crap out of me. We had lost sight of the Rougarou, which made it a lot worse. I could barely keep it together. We crept forward down the flooded aisle, the water swirling around our ankles with each step. Ray moved first, his shoulders rigid, the pistol raised in both hands. He tried to look steady, but I could see it. His elbows locked too tight, his jaw clenched like it was the only thing keeping him together. The store was deathly quiet except for the soft slosh of our steps and the occasional creak of shifting debris. Then, out of nowhere, something came sailing through the darkness from the left, a soda can, hurled with enough force that it smacked Ray square in the side of the head. Ray spun on instinct and fired 2 shots into the shadows, the blasts deafening in the narrow space. The muzzle flashes lit up the twisted aisles for a heartbeat, but hit nothing but wall and wet shelving. The thunder of the shots rang in our ears, leaving a sharp ringing and the acrid smell of gunpowder hanging in the air. Then Ray staggered backwards, cursing under his breath, one hand flying up to his head. The can must have really hurt. For a few seconds, everything went still again, but that silence somehow made the fear worse. The beast was still there, hiding in the wreckage somewhere, and it was obviously smart enough to use tools. Ray kept swearing under his breath, probably more to comfort himself than anything else, but his voice was definitely quivering now. We pushed forward, taking another 2 steps toward the register, pistol raised. I couldn't stop shaking, my every nerve screaming to run, to get out of there before that thing circled back and cornered us in that damn store. The Rougarou howled from the shadows, high and broken like nothing I'd ever heard. My vision blurred with panic, and Ray too looked like he was about to lose it. He waved the gun around frantically, but couldn't find anything worth shooting at in the dark and the chaos. Then another crash, this time a box of beer bottles hurled from the dark, exploding at our feet. Glass splintered everywhere. We scrambled back, splashing hard, and that was it for me. "Forget it!" I yelled, voice cracking. "Forget the damn money! Let's get the hell out before this thing cuts us off and tears us to pieces." Ray didn't argue. His tough guy front had been cracked wide open. We began backing down the aisle slowly, step by cautious step, water sloshing around our calves. Ray kept the pistol up, sweeping it wildly in every direction, his breathing loud and erratic. I kept glancing over my shoulder, afraid we'd see that silhouette again, crouched or standing, but there was only darkness and broken shelving. Then, just as we passed an intersection between aisles, we saw movement to our right. 2 aisles down, a huge silhouette shifted briefly between shadows. Ray fired again without hesitation, 2 quick shots that lit up the store in harsh white bursts. But nothing screamed, nothing dropped, just the thundering echo of wasted bullets. We kept moving backwards. The front doors were only a few yards away and wide open. The moment we hit the open space in front of the doors, we both turned and broke into a full sprint. Floodwater surged around our legs as we splashed through the exit, stumbling out into the massive parking lot. The rain had started again, a light mist that clung to our skin. Behind us, from somewhere deep in the store, came an ungodly howl that didn't sound like anything natural. It started low and guttural, like a wolf's warning, but then rose into something else entirely, a screech that cut through the rain and probably echoed through the entire neighborhood. It sent a jolt down my spine and made my legs move even faster. We didn't stop running until the store was 3 blocks behind us. We didn't speak. We just ran, as if silence alone would keep the thing from following. The whole way back to his cousin's house, the pistol hung forgotten at his side. Neither of us said a word. It didn't follow us. I think whatever it was found enough food in the abandoned store to keep it busy back there. Meat in the freezer, sausages, jerky, maybe even some other looter who hadn't been as lucky. The store was full of things that could sustain a scavenger for days, even one as large as this creature. It didn't care about us once we were gone. For a long time after the incident, I didn't go out at night, didn't hang around in the streets or wander into dark buildings like I used to. I started sticking to the daylight, took odd jobs, then steady ones. The idea of honest work under the sun suddenly seemed a lot more inviting than chasing easy money in the shadows. My name is Caleb. I was born and raised in Calcasieu Parish, about 10 minutes outside Lake Charles, Louisiana. Grew up around levees and swamps, the kind of place where folks talk more about snakes and gators than politics. My father worked construction, and I followed in his muddy footsteps. I've seen hurricanes tear through this land before, but Hurricane Laura in 2020? That was something else. It didn't just rip off roofs and splinter trees. It peeled the skin off the land. The days after were chaos. No power, no water, no sleep. Just heat, rot, and silence. I was out there early one morning, checking the damage to the levee down near Preen Lake, when I saw something I still can't explain to this day. The sun wasn't up yet, just that dim blue light that makes everything look flat and ghost-like. The levee had been chewed up badly, cracked asphalt, sagging dirt, water where it shouldn't be. I was out there early because I was hoping to get the contract to fix it once the town started rebuilding. Thought if I got a head start, took some photos, wrote up a preliminary report, maybe I'd beat the bigger firms to the punch. I was picking my way along the high edge, boots squelching in the muck, when I noticed movement down by the water. At first I thought it was a lost dog, a big one, maybe a shepherd or even a mastiff, dragging something out of the current. I squinted, trying to get a better look. It wasn't thrashing. It wasn't barking. Its attention was focused on something in the water. I stepped closer, keeping my boots on the firmer part of the slope. Whatever it was had its back to me, crouched low near the edge of the levee, half in the water and half out. Its limbs looked wrong, too long, too stiff at the joints. Its back had a rise to it, a thick hump between the shoulders, like the spine was curved wrong or broken. The thing moved with this strange, rolling gait, and I felt the first twinge of unease settle into my chest. It was trying to pull something large out of the floodwater. A carcass, limp and tangled in the current, gradually surfaced as the creature yanked relentlessly, its paws slipping on the muddy slope. The body in the water was soaked, bloated, its belly distended from days of drifting. At first glance, I thought it might be a wild hog or a deer, something common to see after a storm. But then I caught the faded yellow of its coat, matted and slick, and saw the familiar shape of a paw hanging limp. It was a dog, a golden retriever, someone's pet, probably swept away when the water rose too fast and caught the owner by surprise. The sight was depressing. A few days earlier, this dog that might have been waiting at the back door, tail wagging, hoping to see the person it trusted completely and loved more than itself. Apparently, that person never showed up. I actually had to choke back tears for a second. I took another few cautious steps forward, maybe 15 yards away now. At that point, I was still thinking the creature pulling at the retriever was also a dog, a big, strange-looking one, maybe injured or just worn down from the storm. The way it was tugging at that body, it crossed my mind that maybe it was trying to help, trying to save a packmate or mourn one. The levee was full of debris and heartache. Stranger things had happened. I'd seen dogs refuse to leave their dead owners, or guard flooded homes as if waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. So I approached slowly and quietly, hoping not to scare it off. That's when the thing turned slightly to the side, just enough for me to see its face, and all the pity drained right out of me in an instant. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen in my life. The muzzle was somewhat dog-like, but wrong, too wide. The jaw much heavier than a dog's, and full of fangs that didn't belong in anything natural. Its ears twitched, and I could hear it sniffing the air, loud and wet. It crouched low and sank its teeth into the retriever's side, tearing off a long strip of meat with a horrifying crunch. I could hear the tendons snap from where I stood. The smell hit me a second later. Wet fur, mud, and the sharp metallic sting of blood. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The thing kept eating, loudly, messily, and greedily. It must have been starving. Then it stopped. It lifted its head, slowly. Its body went still like a switch had flipped. I didn't move, not a muscle. The creature turned toward me with this slow, deliberate twist of its upper body, keeping its paws planted. For a moment, we just stared at each other in the pale dawn light. Its eyes didn't glow like in the movies, but they caught what little light there was, reflective, intelligent, and locked straight onto mine. I stumbled back a step, slipped in the mud, and nearly fell. My heart was hammering. I expected it to charge. I braced for it, but it didn't. Instead, it just turned slowly. Then it rose. The creature unfolded its warped spine and pushed itself off the ground and onto two legs, like a bear might, but slower and far less fluid. Its spine popped audibly several times. It wasn't just tall. It was massive, easily over 7 feet, maybe more. Its torso was thick, but the limbs were long and ropey with muscle, and its claws hung low at its sides. For a second, it didn't move, just stood there, arms swaying loosely, shoulders hunched, staring me down, like it was trying to decide what I was and what to do with me. Then it did something that shook me to the core. It opened its mouth and started to growl, a low, guttural sound that made the mud at my feet seem to tremble. But the growl stretched and warped, rising in pitch until it became something far worse. A howl, a scream, a moan, like it couldn't decide what kind of noise it wanted to make. Or maybe it was trying to make them all at once. It sounded like metal twisting, like wind being sucked through a broken throat. It wasn't just loud, it was wrong, primal, alien even. The kind of sound that bypasses your ears and goes straight to your spine. I felt my stomach flip. My body no longer wanted to stay upright. That noise didn't belong in any swamp, forest, or floodplain. It didn't belong anywhere in this world. The monster reached down, took hold of the dead dog by the collar with one hand, just like a man would, and turned. What it did next horrified me just as much as that hellish noise. It began dragging the bloated retriever up the levee slope, claws digging into the wet earth for traction, its hunched frame silhouetted against the growing light. The dog's body bounced and slid along the mud as it climbed. At the top, it paused briefly, sniffing the air again, then slipped down the far side, vanishing into a patch of flooded forest that had been swallowed whole by the hurricane surge. Water sloshed around its legs as it disappeared between the drowned trees, dragging its meal into the shadows without ever looking back. I stayed frozen there for at least a full minute after it disappeared. My legs were shaking. My throat was dry. I don't remember walking back to the truck, but I must have because I woke up in the driver's seat with the engine off and my hands still gripping the wheel. I told no one. They'd have said I was sleep-deprived, that I'd imagined it, that trauma from the storm and the destruction was playing tricks on me. Hell, maybe it was, but I've hunted all my life. I know which animals are out there and what they look like. This thing wasn't one of them. In the days that followed, I found myself searching online for any information I could find on strange animal sightings or creatures spotted in the bayous. It wasn't long before I stumbled across reports of so-called dogmen and werewolf-like creatures, mostly up north, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Eyewitness accounts, blurry photos, audio recordings. A lot of it sounded crazy, but too much of it matched what I saw. Then I found something closer to home, the Rougarou, a Cajun legend, older than the town I grew up in. Stories passed down for generations about a cursed wolfman that stalked the bayous at night. Before all this, I'd never believed in stuff like that. Now, I'm not so sure. All legends have an element of truth, although I couldn't possibly imagine how a being like that came into the world and managed to stay hidden in this day and age. Anyway, I'll keep my eyes open and update you guys if I see it again or hear anything.